Welcome back, guys. So this week, Eric and I will be discussing Kafka on the Shore, and it definitely was an interesting one. Trying to figure out if we just read a masterpiece or an absolute fever dream. This is another episode of Fitness, Fables, and Fatherhood. My name is Josiah. This is Eric the Blue joining us from out of his normal office. So we may have a little bit of different camera quality today, but should be able to hear him just fine. How you been, Eric?
It's been good. I'm soaking up some sun. I went to the West Coast, so it's been good. How about you?
Been pretty good as well. Kind of hanging out. Midwest, we've had some pretty bad storms, which you're fortunately missing. But no, it's been nice. Today is a beautiful day outside. High 60s, little breeze, sun's out. It's a good day. Have to do some lawn mowing after this. So we discussed that this book was a little bit different as far as our normal taste, and the two of us had some sort of opposite experiences with it. I don't want to give away too much early on, just given the spoilers, but what were your overall thoughts of the book?
This one caught my attention right away. I liked the cover of it. I can't really show my cover here. It
I can
wants
show
to
mine.
the green screen. Yeah. So, it's interesting. I like to kind of read into, what are the colors doing? What's the cover trying to portray? And it's kind of interesting. You've got this weird, nonsensical cat in the foreground, and in the background, the shadow is this old man with an umbrella, who we find out his name is Nakata. It's kind of a crazy old man. And then along the top, there's this bird, right? And we come to know a boy named Crow. And so the colors are also interesting to me too. I don't know if you read the middle as more of a pink or like a purple, but I always try to look at, what are those colors trying to represent, right? So green, kind of a blending of blue and red. I kind of read the pink as kind of a purplish, right? Again, kind of a mixture of the primary colors. And then the yellow is traditionally like a color of change. And so for me, it was kind of interesting as I'm diving into this book, and I think the original hook was just there was so much contrast within the first two chapters, because you're reading two very different kind of storylines that work parallelly throughout the book, and then they kind of join up and pass each other towards the end. So again, when we've talked about books in the past, the plot really intrigued me in the beginning, right? Just that there was something that was going to happen, there was some mystery, but then somewhere in the middle, it kind of lost me, just because I think the content of it was just it made me struggle. And then towards the end, I actually just kind of didn't feel like I got the ending or like the resolution that I might have wanted. I've since like kind of maybe come back away from that as I've chewed through it a little bit more. So now I think I'm appreciating it more.
Mm-hmm.
So it was this weird journey of like really liking it, not liking it at all, I think it was terrible, and then now like I'm appreciating it again. But very different book. I wouldn't have chosen this if I was just like going to Barnes and Noble, right? So
Yeah.
so
Well,
I
and that's
appreciate.
kind of the point of our wheel, is to get us outside of our comfort zones. This was one of my entries. I've seen the book a lot online
Mhm.
as something that's been praised highly. We had almost opposite experiences. I text messaged you on the way back to Minnesota for the holiday, Memorial Day, and essentially told you I might DNF the book. Uh, right around chapter like 22 or so, I think I was at, and I was ready to put it down. Told you this might be the first book I didn't finish in a while, and you urged me to keep going, and I did, and found myself loving the book towards the end. You kind of stopped reading it for a while, took a mental break, and ignored the wheel, started Dungeon Crawler Carl, finished Dungeon Crawler Carl, which was one of the books on the list before coming back to Kafka
Yeah.
on the shore. Um, but yeah, mine was almost the exact opposite experience. I started with it, thought, what is going on, and ended up finishing it and actually really liking it.
Yeah.
The
I kept wondering to myself, like in the very beginning, he has this little intro that basically says that, like, I don't know, they've turned this into, I think, like a play, like it's become a big a
Mhm.
big thing. And so as I'm reading it, I'm like wondering like how they possibly would turn this into into something like a play, right? It's very, very different.
Yeah, and we both have the same copy. So there are a few different editions of the book. One of the covers, as you spoke about the cover, has sort of this little white oblong shaped creature on the front of it. It's a very
Mm.
odd looking cover, um, which we can talk about because was it aliens?
Mm.
We'll talk about. We can talk about that later, but you're right. Like there isn't a great resolution. So if you are the type of reader that needs a book to be wrapped up at the end with a clean and clear and concise ending, this is not that at all. And I think that's kind of the point. You spoke about the introduction or that little um, like multi page intro by Murakami himself, and he talked about how all of his books he sets aside something that he wants to achieve or accomplish, or something new that he wants to try. And he had discussed that this book set him up for his sort of most famous novel, which is 1Q84. Um, so might need to delve into that at some point. But it didn't ever say what he actually tried to do in this novel as far as what that sort of new thing was. He said in a previous novel it was to use different perspectives, but that wasn't this novel. But he did do that here. But yeah, as far as the book goes, just kind of giving the 30,000 foot view before we kind of switch over to spoilers. As you said, you have this young boy Kafka, who sort of ran away from home, um, and another elderly man, Nakata. And they Murakami kind of switches as he goes from character to character, chapter to chapter. Kafka being the odd chapters, Nakata being the even chapters. He also changes perspective. One is written from first person, and the other is written from a third person perspective, which is a little off putting initially, which is one of the reasons why I found it just so disconcerting as I started the book.
Mhm.
What was your thoughts of the overall prose, like the style that Murakami was using?
Yeah, I like I picked up on that where it shifted tone as you're talking. Like this was, I don't know if I can get into spoilers, but spoiler alert, I guess. So when you get to this scene about the shore, there's a description where you know it's and I don't know how you pronounce her name. I think it's Saaki, something like that.
Saiki, I
Saiki,
think. Hmm.
yeah, Miss Saiki and Kafka on the shore, and it turns from like one of them puts their hand around the other, and it's in one form, and then it switches over to you, and it becomes personal, right? So,
Yeah, there's the use of like second person a few
mhm,
times in the book,
yep,
which are all very uncomfortable.
yeah,
Um,
it
and
really pulls you in, and it shifts the tone, and
yeah,
I guess yeah. The others, I guess I don't know that maybe I didn't pick up on those shifts as much before between the first and third. I'm trying to think like what scenes like went back and forth.
yeah. So the ones that reference that bring you in and almost put you in the place of the
Yeah.
character, that was the most controversial parts of this, which are
Mm-hmm.
the sex scenes.
Mm-hmm.
There are a few in this book, and all of them almost take you into a more personal position with the characters,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just super uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's sort of the point of the book, because I
Yeah.
found the
I guess.
book was. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I guess I was just thinking. I had to like rethink through some of the different chapters, but so you're kind of relating to, I guess, Nakata. I
Hmm.
actually forget how you pronounce his name.
Yeah, Nakata.
Uh, yeah, Nakata. How he refers to himself in the third person, right? So I mean,
Yeah,
that I guess I kind of read over that just because he was such a strange character in general that it fit his character. So I guess when he juxtaposed the first person to third person, I didn't even think about that from the two different characters' perspectives, right? Like he does make a split there. So um, that's interesting.
yeah. The book was almost like a slew of like liminal spaces, or
Mm-hmm.
like in betweens. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
juxtaposing a lot of different
Everything.
things. Yeah, every
Yeah.
the characters were juxtaposed, as
Yep.
far as Kafka being
Polar
very
opposites.
much, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Old, young. Yep.
Yeah,
Text.
intellectual
Yep.
versus like how Nakata would always refer to himself. Nakata's not very smart.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and if you want to read a book that has everything from um, like literary references to men talking to cats to weird like Shinto religious references, this is your book.
Yeah. A lot of music.
Yeah, a lot of music
Music.
references.
Yeah.
Uh,
Classical.
I I saw like a Reddit post a long time ago before I picked it up, where someone they referenced Kafka on the Shore as being the intellectual's beach book,
Yeah, I can kind of
where
see that. Yeah.
yeah, where it's written from purely an entertainment perspective. It isn't meant to be this masterwork of literature, but all of the references, and there's so much in it
Mm-hmm.
that someone
So much
who
depth.
would consider themselves an intellectual sitting on the beach reading it may like really enjoy it.
Yeah.
So a
It
little bit
made me
about
want to like pull out like some of the music that they were playing. Like
mhm,
it talks about it. I mean, like just in general, like music played, I feel like a big role throughout the whole thing, right? And so
mhm,
just wanting to be in that space and like experience kind of what was going on. For me, this was a really emotional book, which was interesting because I don't think I've read anything that's been quite that emotional, right? Most of the stuff that I feel like I read, even if it's like fantasy, it's based in like some kind of reality that
mhm.
feels concrete. This was so dreamlike, and it kind of said that in the beginning, and I didn't really know what to expect, but like it was, yeah. I think that's a really good description of this. It's very like dreamlike.
Yeah. Well, and they reference the importance of dreams. Like that's a big question
Yeah,
towards the end of the book
in the
is what
beginning,
you
yeah,
do in a dream important?
the
And
responsibility of the dream, yeah,
right. And this
born out of
book
the dream.
is sort of an amalgamation of all of these mythologies and these various mythos. Like you look at it, it's essentially a retelling of Oedipus, like a modern day retelling of the Oedipus story. But also they reference like the tale of Genji in the book, and that also has a big role as far as like hauntings and this sort of dream state. And then I don't remember the story exactly, but like Japanese mythology, like the birth of the islands and sort of this the underworld slash sort of limbo that comes in, and that story is partially retold in the second half of this book, um, which we can talk about a little bit later. But it's a very deep book if you want to get into things, but they also don't, like Murakami doesn't answer any questions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, if you're looking for something to be kind of wrapped up neatly at the end, this is
Mm-hmm.
not the book for you. Um,
Which is kind of interesting too, because I feel like I really liked S, which was, I mean, in a lot of ways I felt like that was a similar type of book that was very strange, dealt with identity. This just came at it from a very different perspective, and
mhm.
yeah, a lot to do with like how a lot of different types of metaphors that we're trying to look at, identity from a variety of different lenses and perspectives.
Yeah, and what's interesting, so had you ever been exposed to Murakami at all prior to reading the book?
No, never knew the name. Yeah.
So I had read or listened to, I should say, his um, what I talk about when I talk about running, which is a nonfiction book. I didn't know who Murakami was at the time, and didn't even after I had heard of Kafka on the Shore and some of his other books like 1Q84. I hadn't put the two together that I had read a book of his in the past. And I listened to it while we were actually training for the 50K that we did.
Mhm.
And Murakami himself is an interesting man. So he decided late in life to be an author. He was actually at a baseball game and
Mhm.
just kind of decided, I want to write books. And then went home and did.
Her book.
So yeah, he wrote a couple books, and he wrote his first one over the course of a year or two, to some fanfare. So Murakami didn't start out life as an author. He started. He was a manager of something. I'm forgetting. But even the tale of the author is quite an interesting tale. So just so that we can discuss the book more openly without being as cryptic as we are, let's head over to our spoiler side of things. So I'll give everyone a few seconds to click away if you don't want any spoilers. But some trigger warnings for this book: there's violence to animals, there's violence to people, there's sexual assault, there's quite a few things in this book that you may want to look into prior to picking it up. But with that, spoilers in 3, 2, and 1. All right, Eric. So let's get into this thing. So first question, biggest question of the entire thing. Do you think it was aliens?
No, no, I don't think it was aliens. This is such a interesting one that I kept kind of going back and forth with, like, should I be rereading or rethinking about this whole book? Like, is this going through a different lens that I'm not considering at all, right? Like, and I think that came back to, like, I looked at the cover and I was looking at the cat and I was thinking, like, is this supposed to be the dream of a cat? Like, I mean, it was that strange, right? No, I think that if anything, I was trying to play with more like the ideas of the dreamlike state, but of course they had like stuff that felt like they were gods. This kind of felt like it, I didn't even know how to think about it. Right, on one track, I also felt like there was so much that was about like chance and the chance of Kafka coming and getting to the library, meeting Mrs. Saiki, right, and then you've got Nakata, who almost by fate, right, is guided to the library. And they intersect, and then they go on, and at the middle of it, you have that Mrs. Saiki, and so to me, I was almost wondering too, like, should I be reading, like, is Mrs. Saiki really the actual proponent, the main character of this whole really tragedy in a lot of ways. So I was trying to like think after I read it, I was like, maybe this is, I should be rethinking about how I even approach the book. But no, I don't think it was aliens, but I mean, there's fantastical stuff, right? You've got fish falling from the sky, leeches falling from the sky when Mr. Nakata opens his umbrella. And you don't know if that's because he caused it or because it's just fate, right? Weird stuff.
Well, and I think fate was a big theme of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you in a way that Miss Saiki is sort of she's the instigator of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So to start from the beginning, you have Kafka. You never get his real name, but he's having a conversation with this other boy, the boy named Crow, as you said. And it's interesting because Kafka means crow in Czech, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what another character says later in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're having this conversation. He decides to leave because he says he's fated to sleep with his mother, sleep with his sister, and kill his father. So he runs away to try to avoid this fate. And then by running away, seems to almost cause it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have that. You have Mr. Nakata, who is taken up as a child into the mountains by his teacher, and there's this scene with the teacher, and some of that didn't seem necessary, but they reference, the reason I asked about aliens is they reference this flying object in the sky
true.
that everybody sees. And the kids reference it because there's all these kids as they go up into the mountains, they all pass out, and you can see them, they're looking at something, their eyes are moving around, but the adult is still awake. All of the kids are unconscious, and they all wake up after a short amount of time except for Nakata. And when he wakes up eventually, he can't read, he can't write, he can't do anything. He's been pretty much wiped clean of his memories. And then it follows these two characters, and the timeline is disjointed to start. So the Kafka stuff's happening in the future, the Nakata stuff's happening in the past, and then we're moving through Nakata's storyline much faster, so that eventually they line up towards the end. But Kafka leaves. He meets a girl on a bus. Some stuff happens. He finds his way to a library. The library is the home of Miss Saiki, as well as another person by the name of Oshino, right?
Ushima, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So then Oshima is, yeah, it's Oshima and Oshino, or Hoshino. So
Oh yeah.
Oshima is sort of the front desk person at the library. They become fast friends. He starts working at the library, and it's sort of this old mansion library. It's sort of a retired, um, like rich person's library that was saved and open to the public. Miss Saiki was in love with the former owner, or the mansion dweller's son, but then that person left, to go to college, to go to school, and ended up dying a tragic death. So there's this love story at the beginning,
Hmm.
or
Wasn't it
between
some
the
kind of
two.
like political protest or something? I can't
Yeah, and
remember.
he just so happened to look like the leader of one
Yep.
political group, so they captured him and
Yeah.
tortured him and killed him, and
But
unfortunately
yeah.
he wasn't that person.
Right.
Um, Nakata, in the meantime, is talking to cats, finding cats, because as he was wiped clean by whatever happened in the mountains when he was a boy, it gave him the ability to speak to cats in particular, not necessarily all animals, but cats. So Nakata's doing detective work, almost like some Ace Ventura type stuff, to find this missing cat to supplement his income that he gets from the governor, as he says,
Hmm.
which we find out isn't entirely true, um, because he doesn't understand how things work. But he gets a subsidy, and I found all of the interactions with Nakata very interesting, because
Hmm.
the way he would talk a lot of times, he would,
Subsidy.
yeah, it's a
He would even
sub
like
city.
misunderstand
Yeah,
the words, and
yeah.
you read them phonetically and understand it. Yeah.
Hmm.
I really appreciated that. It really spoke to his character. Like you can enter his brain. He's this weird,
Hmm.
like, but
And
still.
yeah, and he references the fact that he's hollow, so he can like go to a void space, because he spends a night sitting in like a field by himself waiting for a cat to show up. And
Mhm.
he's like, most people would get bored, but I can go inside myself and
Mhm.
just kind of be.
Just be,
um and so he
no
doesn't get
sense
bored.
of like purpose other than like something
Mhm.
that is just kind of pulling him, right?
Right,
There's a lot
right.
of like pulling of him to these places. He doesn't know exactly why he has to go someplace, but he will, right?
Yeah, and that I found as being an interesting, like characterization. I felt like the three of them, Kafka, Miss Saiki, and Nakata, were sort of representations of like the past, present, and future. As like at one point, I believe Kafka and Oshima are talking, uh, and Miss Saeki, she's sort of living in the past. She loved that young man when they were teenagers. That was her most happy time. She wrote this song about their relationship, which is some of the music you were referencing. The So
And the
she is
song
sort
was
of
actually called Kafka on the Shore, right?
right,
So it was
right.
like, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, she's sort of this representation of like living in the past. Kafka is so obsessed with avoiding his future, and he's sort of running headlong into it. While Nakata, he even states at one point, he's like, I don't have a past, I don't have a future. I am only the present. And I found that really interesting between the three. Because eventually you do find Miss Saiki has there is a manifestation or a ghost like representation of her as a 15-year-old
Mm.
that presents itself a few times. And Kafka is again sort of trying to avoid this future state the entire time. He's solely focused on what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah.
But
Well, and like I think we should also mention too. So the boy that she loved, his name was Kafka, right? And so that's what was so interesting. Then when he named himself Kafka,
mhm,
and so that was like part of the reason why, right? I think Oshima introduced and accepted and brought him into the library to stay with them for a while. So just kind of interesting. It was this kind of reflective, journey that turned inward on itself, right, in this kind of cyclical motion. Because as you come, well, I should let you continue on with it. I mean, it's so interesting, right?
yeah, yeah, and so Kafka, we'll circle back, but Kafka goes to the library. Nakata is searching for these cats, and eventually Kafka goes into the woods with Oshima because they have to avoid. He has to not be there for a little while. To lay low because Kafka's father does end up dying, and the police are searching for Kafka. We find out that you're not supposed to go into these woods, that you're supposed to stay at the cabin for some reason, and it's
You get lost up there.
you can get lost, and we can talk about that in a bit and its sort of connection with Shintoism and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the like relationships with the forest in Japan. But Nakata, again, these timelines don't quite line up, but on his timeline, he finds himself in Kafka's father's house, led there by a talking, and that uh, Kafka's father is a sculptor, but he isn't Kafka's father at this time. He's a manifestation of like the bad guy. And we
Johnny
can talk about,
Walker.
yeah, Johnny Walker, who, yes, is related to the whiskey brand. But we can talk about the bad guys in the book. Then the bad guys torturing cats and beheading them, which makes Nakata very angry. And then Nakata kills Kafka's father, or Johnny Walker, there, and then sets things into motion. Nakata has to find a stone to open a path, a gate stone
The
to,
entry.
and he has to open it, but he has no idea why or what he's doing. He just knows he has to. Again, he's sort of this. Um, he has a present task, and that's his thing. So he
I
meets another.
forget what I forget what like started him on that journey of knowing that. It was just after killing Kafka's father. It was just felt like I can't remember if that it just clicked into his head or what, but I just remember he said, "Well, I've got to go," and he gets on the road, right?
Yeah, essentially, he just says he has to go west. I think like he just
Yeah,
has to keep going,
yeah,
and he doesn't know where he's going or why he's going that way. He's just like,
yeah.
I have to go.
Mm-hmm.
We find out later that he's been being called to meet with Miss Saiki, and that she's waiting for him, and that their stories are intertwined because they've both dealt with these gate stones. Um, Miss Saiki when she was younger, when she was 15, and Nakata now as an adult. But he meets a baseball fan by the name of Hoshino, who's a driver.
Truck driver. Yeah.
He drives truck, and the two of them sort of team up and foil the bad guy's plan in the most unfulfilling way possible. And we have these manifestations of things along the way. So that's sort of what happens in the book. So what was your thoughts on like the overall the climax, or not even the climax, the bad guys, like the motivations of the characters?
Yeah, okay, so for motivations, like I was thinking about this with Kafka. Obviously, he this is kind of like a coming of age story because he's 15 and he keeps trying to say like there's some phrase that's repeated over and over, but basically like he has to be really
Mm.
strong 15-year-old. He's got to become a man. He's going to be the strongest one, right? And it's very like sexually laden throughout, and his like his desire, but like he's got mommy issues because he didn't have like his mom and his sister left, right? And so you very like driven by passion, like thinking kind of Jungian, like this is like very much like ego driven.
Mhm.
Whereas on the flip side, you don't have that pull. It's just that there is a place that is known that he needs to go. And I was trying to think like after he killed Johnny Walker, like I thought that it was just that he knew that there was a place that he needed to go to, right? So I think he got in the truck first, said we need to go here, and then when they got there, I think that's when Hoshino said, what are you going to do now? And he was like, I don't know. I just knew I had to go here. And then
Mhm.
it felt like he came up with this idea of, oh, I've got to go find the entry stone, right? It seemed like it wasn't any particular conversation. It just kind of popped up. Like it was just filled the space. And yet on Nakata's journey, you also had this weird individual who was in between Nakata because he like falls asleep a bunch, right? And sleeps for like a day or two at a time. and oddly enough, was his name Horshino, right?
Ocean.
Horshino, yeah, Horshino. He, the truck driver, he like ends up quitting his job just because he like kind of likes this weird old dude, and then you've got this weird gentleman in the middle that's kind of like a godlike character, but he goes by,
Colonel Sanders.
yeah, Colonel Sanders, right?
Mhm.
Random, doesn't have any kind of like I don't know where like what he was trying to say with this, right?
He
But
said,
Colonel Sanders is like faded and he's pulling this
right.
forward. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, but Colonel Sanders explicitly says, "I am not a god. I am a concept."
Yeah,
And
but
then when the guy's
okay.
like, "So you're a god or you're a Buddha?" and he's like, "No, I am. I are you dense? I'm a concept."
Yeah, I don't know how to read that, right? But
Yeah, yeah.
wait, so when you ask like, is it aliens? No, there's too much weird shit going on on both sides for it to like be some extraterrestrial thing, even though we think that there's like some kind of blob thing in the very end,
Mhm.
right? But like I read that more as like, maybe this was like mysticism. There's maybe something there. And that's where like, as you were kind of talking about, there's maybe some Shinto kind of stuff with the forest and whatnot. Like, I'm kind of curious if maybe that was something from maybe some other mysticism or stories that
Yeah.
maybe I just wasn't able to read into. But
Well, and I think fate is a big part of the book and sort of this liminal
yeah.
dream state, like this sort of middle space. Because,
Mm-hmm.
like, so ravens or crows in Shintoism or in Shinto are like, they're messengers of the gods, kind of
Mm-hmm. Odin, and he's got
like
Hugin and Munin and
and mhm.
wisdom and intellect. Yeah.
Right. So they're like the messengers of the gods. And you have this crow at the very beginning talking to Kafka, telling him he needs to leave, he needs to go do this thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like he's telling him a storm is coming and he needs to
Mm-hmm.
weather the storm. And there's this long sort of quote at the beginning of this very vivid description of a sandstorm. So you have the crow being sort of this otherworldly being. Then you have Johnny Walker, who is the bad guy. And I don't know if you've taken the same takeaway as I did. I did not think that Johnny Walker and Colonel Sanders were the same thing. I felt like they were two
I didn't
sides.
catch. Yeah, I didn't catch that. Maybe parallel, right? But
Yeah, because Johnny Walker's talking about how he needs to harvest the souls of cats to build a flute,
mm-hmm.
so that he could then use that flute to harvest the souls of
Get
other
bigger.
things to make a bigger flute. And that in order to sort of stop this cycle, Nakata needed to kill him. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so Johnny Walker's the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so he dies in the middle of the book, and you think like, okay, that's the end of him, but he comes back later. So you have this Johnny Walker character, you have Colonel Sanders.
Well, and
Right.
before you go, because like that was such a crucial moment. It's so vivid and it's so like gross, and we didn't really need to go into that much. But
Yeah, the
but
details
it
of the
was
cats.
yeah. But it was interesting to have Nakata be an empty shell that didn't
Mhm.
have anything possessed in him, no passion, right? And
Mhm.
yet, even without that, just the sheer wrongness of this was enough to get him to like instinctively end him, right? So like
Yeah.
it, to me, that pierced the veil, and it pulled out that human quality in Nakata to pull him forth. So yeah, I could appreciate that piece of it, right? Like
But then there's references to the possibility. So Nakata said he was a shell,
mm-hmm.
and he wakes up after killing Johnny Walker. There's no blood on him.
Yeah,
He's completely clean. And when he goes to confess,
yeah.
like he's like, if you would have done this, you'd be covered in blood, and you're not. But then
Mm-hmm.
you have Kafka wake covered in blood, and the timelines in the book that this happens so far apart that it's hard to connect them. But you're like, did Kafka enter into Nakata's body while he slept in this sort
Mm-hmm.
of dream space
Mm-hmm.
and take over the shell that is Nakata to
Mm-hmm.
fulfill the prophecy of killing his father?
Yeah.
And
I kept wondering if maybe this was like a split personality kind of thing, right? But then it just didn't line up, so I kind of abandoned that idea.
yeah,
But there again, like it also talks about that sometimes, I can't remember when they said this, but they said something about like sometimes time like gets it wrong or something, and sometimes it can go back, like it can happen out of order. So there again, like it made me wonder, like, is there some way that I'm reading this where really like this actually was, it was Kafka who killed him, which with the prophecy and everything else like implies that like it really was okay. But then how would it be that these things could overlap over time? And maybe the point is, I guess we don't see Kafka and Nakata both at the library at the same time.
No,
And
they
so,
never really crossed paths directly in the book.
And it's like it's so strange because you've got like I'm trying to like understand if this whole picture of Kafka on the shore is that really it all, everything seems to imply that she really is his mother, right?
I
But
don't
in the
think
same,
so.
well,
Because towards the end, she says, like, that's your story, that's not mine.
yeah,
And
it blends in
she,
the middle when they're
right.
together, right?
Yeah, but she
But she
references,
makes that sentence of like you're dead, and so then it made me wonder, like, okay, is this just a memory of who he had been? Did he not really die? Did he get maybe beat so bad, the original Kafka that was in the political thing, right? Maybe he got beat so bad that he, had a concussion or whatever, and maybe he became the old man that got put into a home. You know what I mean? And then finally found his way back to her long lost love, right?
oh, you're
Like,
talking about Nakata?
yeah, like the timeline makes me think, okay, maybe he just lost his lost his sense of self in this thing. I don't know.
But
I
I
don't know
think
what to
he's
believe or not to
older
believe.
than her, right? I think he's older than
Yeah.
her because he's
Well,
described as an old man, and all of the stuff happened like he was a young kid, and it was World War II,
yeah.
and she's described to be in her early 50s,
Mm-hmm.
and Kafka's
They were
15,
supposed to be kids together. Yeah.
right? And they were supposed to be kids together. Yeah, I didn't think so. I think they were all loosely intertwined, and there was some indications there may be some reincarnation sort of involved
Mm-hmm.
here,
Mm-hmm.
given the statement at the end where she looks at Kafka and she says, "Well, don't you remember that was you with me when that was painted?"
Mm-hmm.
And then
Right.
he gets a memory back,
Right.
and he remembers like embracing her while he was on the shore.
Yeah.
Um,
So then it
so
was like this, why did you leave me? Kind of,
right.
there was some kind of sentiment. So then that made me wonder, like, what, because she's talking about, maybe she's just blending her Kafka with him, right?
Yeah,
Just the idea of yeah, I don't know.
well, and there is some discussion of the in between. So I mean, if we go back to those characters, so we
Yeah.
have Crow, we have Johnny Walker, we have Colonel Sanders, and it seems to be like Johnny Walker's the bad guy, and Colonel Sanders and the Crow are the good guys.
Mm-hmm.
Johnny Walker has this big plan to end the world, but he needs to take advantage of a time when this entry stone, this sort of gate stone, is opened, and he's been kind of waiting. So there's those three characters. They reference themselves as concepts, that they're not gods. They're just like
Mm-hmm.
these sort of concepts of I'm not even sure.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
in a lot of like Eastern religions, and I'm no expert by any stretch of the
Mm-hmm.
imagination, but
Mm-hmm.
you have like these like the kami, and I believe that the kami are sort of these sort of otherworldly conceptualizations of like nature and things like that. But I did find it very interesting. And those three, the Crow, Johnny Walker, and Colonel Sanders, seem to be sort of the main thing. Like that's where like the world ending stuff is happening. Like that would be
Mm-hmm.
very interesting to know. It's like these
Mm-hmm.
guys are all like pitted against each other, and they're just using Nakata and Kafka and like
Mm-hmm.
Miss Saiki and these guys as like pieces on a board, and
Yeah.
Hoshino,
Yep.
because Hoshino plays a huge role at the end,
Mm-hmm.
as sort of their
Kind of takes
pawns in
over.
the game. And
Mm-hmm.
we're looking at these guys, the human people, but we have no idea what the stakes are. Like
Mm-hmm.
we know Johnny Walker's trying to do something big. We have no idea what that is.
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and that makes it difficult if you're more of a plot forward reader, that you need this
Yeah.
this hook to be
Yeah.
like, to be drawn in. You're very much focused on these characters in a much less at stake sort of scenario.
Yeah,
There's a
their
lot,
own personal narrative that's going
right?
on. And yeah, and, you know, for me it was interesting, this Johnny Walker and the flute idea, because he seems like the Pied Piper, right? He's like luring these cats along and pulling them on their journey, right? But then you also have like this emotive song of the Kafka on the shore. And so it's kind of this whole question of, you know, what imbues the music, and what either pulls you along or what pushes you, what maybe gets you stuck, right? Like uh, I know that there was a certain song that Urshima would play when he's in the car, right? And it just kind of made me wonder, like, maybe I was missing a piece there in terms of, like, was there something literary that, or not literary, but from like a music perspective that maybe I was kind of missing, right? In terms of like how I should be influenced to read those passages through a lens of music, right? And so like there could be a layer there too, that what's inspiring the music. Is there a naturalness to it that just is that imbues people to move, right? Like what it's a sense of like, what is identity? Is it something natural? And that's where you kind of get into Oshima's kind of tension around how do you categorize oneself, right? Are,
Mm-hmm.
are you male because you were born male, or are you female because
Mm-hmm.
you also have that gender dynamic to it. And so it's the
Yeah, but
classification. Like there's so much that goes into, even we haven't even talked about like the metaphor of the library of itself, right? The shell of the library, they talk about that as being like kind of the piece, not without the books, like the vessel, right? The value being in just the place itself. They also talk about the value of kind of the books within it, kind of the
mm-hmm.
wisdom, right, in a way. And then you also have this weird like interchange with some random girls that come in and they start like looking at the books and how did you categorize these? Well, they're it's a gender politics about you should have more women, and so it was just hilarious to see Orshima or I butcher the name,
Oshima. Yeah.
Oshima, yeah, Oshima, kind of put them in their place and be like, there's structured order to it, but like he goes into a whole rant there. But it's the
Yeah.
point that like it's the stories like that you think that there's a naturalness to it, but really there is like some inherent bias in even the organization of those stories within. And so in a lot of ways, the library being that centerpiece where everybody comes to is interesting, because I feel like Murakami might be kind of saying that it's about the relationships that are brought together, that are like brought in and out of this, right? It's not just wisdom, it's not just body that moves you, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the interplay between them both. So I was
Well,
trying to
and
look
that
at that dynamic too, to try to
right,
say like,
right. Well, and it's juxtaposed with the ending. I mean, so this book is so crazy. We've kind of jumped around, and
mhm.
it's hard to get a grasp on it
And
because
that's
at the
the whole book though too.
exactly at the end they're in this sort of limbo like space, or Kafka is at least, and they talk. He asks if there's a library there, and he's told yes, there is a library, but the library has no books. That's where
Hmm.
memories are dealt with.
Yeah.
So the sort of parallel world that you happen upon at the end doesn't have the same sort of rules as our physical world. But so speaking of Oshima, and I did think that scene with the two women that came to the libraries, I think that Murakami, I mean, he's gotten some backlash over the years of being a like chauvinistic writer, because most of his
Mm-hmm.
female characters are more of a sort of like object. They're objectified a lot, and you saw that early with like the girl on the bus,
Mm-hmm.
like his sister, or his
Yeah.
quote unquote sister, because you
Yeah.
find out they're not, but they sort of say at one point they're going to believe as if they
Yeah.
are. Um, and having those two come, I think, may have been him kind of responding to that criticism a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But Oshima is is probably my favorite character in the entire book.
Yeah.
which is funny because I like Oshima and I like Hoshino.
Mm.
Kafka, I despised Kafka throughout the book.
Yeah.
What were your
Yeah.
thoughts on the individual characters?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel you there. Like Kafka just seems like this. I don't know. Yeah, there's nothing to. I guess I didn't not like him, but it wasn't a character that like. Yeah, I found that engaging. I did find Oshima probably is my favorite character as well. There's just so much strangeness to it that I feel like the whole book I was just more curious than anything. It wasn't that I liked any one particular character, and especially with kind of the strangeness of this spirit of Miss Saiki, right?
Mhm.
Is I'm trying to like figure out like how I should be looking at these different characters. Yeah, none of them actually spoke to me that much. Really despised Johnny Walker. Obviously, they did a good
Mhm.
job of that. But yeah, even like Hoshino, I guess I didn't really care for him because he just felt like he was very strange that he would just abandon his life to follow this strange old man. It wasn't like he was necessarily caring for him. He was just curious, and it was a strange, fun adventure. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, we'll go along on the ride. But like,
Well, and that's almost like a reference to like Christianity and following Jesus,
yeah, okay,
or like
yeah,
following the Buddha,
that's fair.
because
Yeah,
like
yeah.
he even references himself as like an apostle at some point, or
Mm-hmm. Okay, I missed that
like
one.
an acolyte to
Yeah,
Nakata, and that he would follow this man until
yeah.
like he died.
And what's so interesting at the end, though, I mean, with him kind of taking now the dawn of Nakata and being able to talk to cats,
Talk to
right? Like,
cats, yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
So then, it's this flipping of the stone. It's a cyclical kind of thing that's going to continue to go on. That's why, yeah, again, like Colonel Sanders and even the Pied Piper, who's still there, but in the afterlife, in this middle space, right, makes you again, I guess I didn't pick up on the reincarnation part, but like you definitely kind of get that sense of like this is just it's an eternal thing that's going to continue to go on.
Yeah. Well, and there's some references to like the tale of Genji. So there's a lot of literary references. Well,
Mm,
let's backtrack really quick. So for those that don't know, Oshima, the library's sort of caretaker, other than Miss Saiki, um, throughout the book referenced to as he, and when those two women arrive at the library, you find out was born biologically female, and sort of to put the two ladies in their place, whips out the driver's license and it says female on there, but
mm,
identifies as a gay man,
mm,
um, because is attracted to men and identifies as a man. So but then throughout the rest of the book, Kafka maintains that sort of gender identity referencing as it's always he throughout the entire book, which I appreciated.
mm,
Um, and even the brother later on, because Oshima has a brother, references to Oshima as the brother. So very accepting in that way.
yeah.
But going back to sort of the literary references throughout the book, so I didn't pick up as much. I'm not as familiar with the music, but the
Mm,
literary references from the get go, I thought all were very well placed and very appropriate. Um, so Murakami has a tendency to get called out for his use of like intimacy scenes,
mm,
sex scenes throughout his works, and especially this book, because these ones are quite uncomfortable as far as their placement and the orientation of the reader. By that I mean like the perspective of the reader, as well as the characters that are involved, and sort of the premise that is put upon them as them being related or it being forced upon someone. But if you look at even from the get go, the book Kafka reads when he arrives at the library, is I believe Arabian Nights, and it
mm,
is a specific translation of Arabian Nights that was banned for explicit scenes. It was banned in many countries, including Japan. Um, so you're getting this sort of reference to this explicit material and this banned book for being too explicit, kind of setting you up for that's things that are similar are going to happen in this book. And then you have the tale of Genji, and there's this concept in like Japanese culture of like a living ghost. So like you could haunt someone while alive, but it's mostly associated with women, and it's mostly associated with like deep emotions. So like a woman can haunt someone else from afar, by like projecting their spirit, and that's where you get sort of this 15-year-old version of Miss Saiki, who was left in the afterlife, and you get a reference to the tale of like the birth of the Japanese islands between two twins. Like it was a brother and a sister twin, and they birthed the islands, and one of them got pulled into the underworld and like ate of the food there, and they tell Kafka not to eat the food, but he does, when he's in sort of this limbo area, and Kafka goes to leave. And in the story of those two twins, and I don't remember their names, and then or the name of the myth, but the one goes down to retrieve their sibling and tells them the one thing you can't do is don't look back. And then right as they're about to escape, they look back, and the one that's been in the afterlife is like moldy and decayed, and bits of them are falling off, and they're horrified. So instead of saving their sibling, they like throw them back in and like take an entry stone and like close the gate. And that's sort of where this like gate stone things comes from. And you look at that as with Miss Saiki, you find out she opened this stone when she was younger, when she was like 15. And then she went to this other world, and that's where she found the musical tones, the two notes that were sort of the main focus of her song. She said, I found those in the afterlife, or in this limbo zone. But when she came back, she left her 15-year-old self there. And so she's hollow. Nakata, when he went to the afterlife for whatever flying weird thing was overhead, he left part of himself there. So you're kind of left to think that there's a version of Nakata in this limbo area too. Kafka goes there, and you never meet Nakata, but you meet the younger Miss Saiki and then the older Miss Saiki when she eventually passes away. And she tells him to go, but not to look back. And then she like lets him drink her blood, and it's weird.
Vampire.
Yeah, and then says that ends up saving him because he does look back, but then the blood gives him like the powers to keep going. It's crazy. But I did find the literary references were quite applicable, and I do think the same. If you could just delve in, there's so many layers to this. If you could just delve into it all, but you could spend days. I mean,
you could spend a long time on this. Yeah, and honestly, that's part of like what took me such a long time in the beginning. You know, and it was just the reading chapter by chapter, trying to understand how I should approach this. It was so tough. But
and Hoshino, I mean, at one point he meets up with Colonel Sanders. Colonel Sanders gets him a love interest for the night.
That's a polite way of saying it.
Yeah,
3 times over.
And she starts talking about philosophy, and I think it's Hume and someone else that I don't know. And you're like, well, what were the beliefs of these two philosophers? Why are they talking about this right now? Because it's like
I don't feel quite educated too.
Yeah, I don't feel like anything was placed in the book that didn't have a reason, but you're also not given the reason.
Yeah.
So you're like,
the hooker was probably the most educated one of the whole group, right?
Yeah, it's like, man, what? But how do you go into this as far as, okay, what's the? You almost have to do a dissertation on every chapter. And go through, okay, I have to figure out all this stuff.
How do I orient myself? Yeah.
Right. And so as we're getting close to an hour here, so the culmination of the book, sort of the end, between Kafka and Nakata, because they had individual ends to their tales. Did you find one or the other fulfilling or neither fulfilling? What did you think of sort of how Murakami brought everything together at the end, and do you feel like it was satisfying?
That's where originally I said, I texted you and I said, I didn't like this. I liked in the beginning, I didn't like it. But it took me some time as I came back, and I like kept chewing on it and going, man, what was this all about? I just don't understand it. And that's where when I started to think about, like, again, these two parallel paths that intersect, and then they keep going, right? And at the center, so you've got Kafka, again, more like, to me it felt more chance. It was passionate driven. You've got Nakata coming up, not of his own volition, just kind of moving through space. Both of them, one was I would say pulled, right? Nakata was kind of pulled by the Pied Piper and right, some mysterious force that was fated. And on the other one, you had this kind of chance progression and like this longing, this passionate that the physical drawing, right, of him. So it's kind of mind, body, pulling both together. I don't know how much you can say about either one of their journeys because they cross at the library with Miss Sakai, and then
Saiki.
but Sakai, yeah,
Saiki.
Saiki. I'm terrible at names. All right, and then so they cross, but then they both keep going, right? Of course,
Mm-hmm.
Nakata passes, but then there's maybe Hoshino takes over, whatever. Like that's going to continue to go on his journey. And on the flip side, you've got Kafka, who's I don't know if you'd really say he's really matured, in this maturation story of his. In some ways, he has, and he continues to go on. But in the middle, I feel like Miss Sake, Miss S. She's stuck. She's stuck in the middle. She doesn't go anywhere. She's trapped by the memories, and she passes. She passes with joy in some regards, right? She passes with a smile on her face. So in a lot of ways, when I look at this, I don't know how to read it, and I don't know exactly what he's trying to say, because any way that you approach a problem, whether you're coming at it more from a fated perspective or by chance, it will continue to go, right? And so like I didn't really feel like I had a sense of like where does that leave me, right? Like do I categorize my books in the library and keep them in order, knowing that there is like some inherent bias in how I'm categorizing those things, or do I become trapped by the categorization? I'm stuck in it, right? It's this fun play between both worlds, and you kind of have to be able to find a place where you are able to act in the unknowing place in between. And so that's where I don't know how I want to like orient myself, right? After reading this. And that's the part that I'm struggling with because I feel like I haven't gotten there. I feel like there's a piece that I'm really missing, just one little piece, but it just feels like I'm missing the gist of it that'll make everything kind of click together. And that's, I think, why I kind of like it, is because it's taken me on that journey and it's making me think about these things, in a different perspective. So I don't know. Yeah, I like it. I don't like it. Was it entertaining? I wouldn't have like read it for an entertaining perspective, but from the intellectual, journey that we got to go on. I mean, there's so much there that I'm still intrigued. You can just feel it, right? Like I still want to dig into this and like figure out what is that little grain that maybe I'm not getting. Mm-hmm. Now I'm thinking about, is this aliens, right? Maybe
right. Well,
maybe I should believe in aliens.
Well, because they do reference like this unidentified flying object at the beginning, yeah. And it's made a deal of for the first like 20 chapters, and then you never hear about it again for the entirety of the rest. And again, I don't feel like anything was placed. I don't feel like anything was placed unintentionally. Like I don't think there's any red herrings. I think red herrings. I feel like it's all been placed intentionally. So given. Do I think it was aliens? I do not think it was aliens.
I was going to say.
No.
Yeah, like,
no.
What is that white thing that popped out?
The worm thing? Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. Like, I have no idea.
Mystical. Yeah.
But what we do know is that Johnny Walker was sort of waiting for it on the other side. Like, because Johnny Walker said, like, I'm waiting for this thing to happen, essentially the gate, the stone to be opened. And he's sitting on the other side, and Crow attacks him, like the boy named Crow. Yeah. And Johnny Walker says, "You can't hurt me because you're not real. You're imagined." And the Crow attacks him, rips him apart, and you just get this description of Johnny Walker laughing with like his head ripped off and his tongue lolling out, and it's disgusting. And then you get this white massive worm crawl out of Nakata's corpse's mouth, and Hoshino smashes it and ends up killing it at the instruction of a cat. That's how you find out Hoshino can talk to cats. I feel like they wrap up Kafka's story. They wrap up Nakata's story. Nakata passes. Kafka goes back to school, meets with Oshima's brother in the woods. They kind of discuss that Oshima's brother had gone into the woods and had found the soldiers and had been led to limbo at some point in his life as well.
But his brother or sister never did, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But then you have that, and that wraps up their individual stories. Miss Saiki's story is wrapped up. She passes. They burn her memories. Nakata and Hoshino burn her memories. So that's kind of done. Or her memoir. So her story, she says, you have to burn my story. But then you have the second layer of these other entities, Crow and Johnny Walker and Colonel Sanders, and you don't know what they are, who they are, what's at stake in this worm thing. Like, what does Johnny Walker want with it, and why is it trying to get into Johnny Walker? You're just left with this sort of gaping emptiness as far as the conclusion. Like, so it concluded, they won, they beat the thing, but you have no idea why. You know that Colonel Sanders beat Johnny Walker. You know that
for now,
at least.
For now. Yep.
And what those two represented as far as what concepts they were is tough to say. So yeah, I don't know if I was satisfied with the ending either. Like, I finished the book and I just look at it like, I don't want to read it again, but I feel like I have to.
I get that. Well, so metaphorically, like being on the shore, it was interesting how they kind of come in and out, right? It's the coming into the forest and into the city and into the library, right? And at least like Kafka, he would go in and out, right? Now, the brother that drove him back, right? He had at least been into the forest once and came back out, but it's not like he opened up about it, and it didn't, like, you didn't get the sense that like he had like matured and he had like found enlightenment, or there wasn't like anything that I felt like was totally special about that process going in and out. You had I guess like Nakata, from his perspective, he just goes from his his life into the city, and yes, he ends up they go to the forest in the end, and that's kind of maybe a natural progression as he ends, but to me it kind of felt like a tragedy. This all centered around the tragedy of Miss S. She was stuck, she was stuck in the library, and she was just even
well, and her happiest self was the 15-year-old version of her that she left in limbo.
Right. And I mean, if Kafka truly was her son, I mean, how weird, strange, sad, right? All of the above, for leaving him and then confronting him, having this relationship, like, very selfish in a way. Strange. So to me, it felt like, in the way in which Johnny Walker evoked this sense in Nakata to kill Johnny Walker. It almost makes me feel like I should be looking at this tragedy in the center of this whole book as that thing that should make me feel so frustrated that, like, that's the thing that I should negate. And in doing that, you gain that morality of, that's wrong, right? That's the only other thing that, like, I can think of, just because it was so sad in a way. But I don't know. Maybe I'm categorizing it just with my own bias, right?
I can say one thing,
but I think that there's usefulness in categorizing things too, right? So how do you look at that?
Right. But I can definitely say one thing: this book is a thinker, and it's going to provoke some emotion, like, as to what that emotion is for everybody. It's probably going to be a little different.
I would love to have read this in college and had a professor dissect this, right? Like, this is one where I would definitely like love reading this more. As a father now, I don't got the time for it. I'd rather read Dungeon Crawler Carl and read the whole series in a couple days, right? So.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely, that's a very different read than this. So let's give our book ratings, and then we'll move on to our spinning of the wheel, and we'll kind of talk about what we're going to do next. But from a scale of 0 to 10, what's your thoughts on Kafka on the Shore?
Intellectually, I'm gonna give it like a 9. For readability and entertainment, I want to give it like a 5. So I think I got to give it like a 7 overall, just because you got to be in the right headspace. It's got to be the right person who wants to read this kind of book. If I were
Mm-hmm.
younger, I think I'd be really interested in it. If I had a book group that was really going to take the time to dissect it, then maybe I'd be interested. But if you're just going through Barnes and Noble, like, I probably wouldn't recommend reading this one unless you like really strange stuff.
Yeah. I think, but that's what this is. This is a book group.
Yeah,
It's a
right.
two-person book
I
group.
mean, it's good.
Maybe
That's
it'll
true.
get bigger
Today
someday.
it is. Yeah.
But yeah, so I agree with you. I think I'd give it a 7 out of 10, maybe a 7.5. I mean, I put my little sticky notes in there, annotated this book to be all. I agree. You have to be in a certain headspace. I started the first 20 chapters. I will say, like the first 3 chapters, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Then like 4 through 20, it's like I don't know if I'm going to finish this. Um, and then as I read through it and delved into it more deeply, I found that I was starting to enjoy it quite a bit. So I'd give it a 7 out of 10. I agree with you. In the right headspace at the right time in life,
Yep.
in the right setting, I could go as high as 9, but I'd give it a 7 out of 10 overall. And definitely look into your trigger warnings on this one for sure.
Yeah. Yep.
So, all right. That being said, you've already completed Dungeon Crawler Carl, which was on the list, which was on the wheel for the next roll around. And because I was waiting on you to finish Kafka on the Shore, I started it. I've got about 150 pages left, so I'm in the part 2 towards the tail end. So that'll be our next review. Will be Dungeon Crawler Carl, and it might be sooner than a month from now, since I'll probably have the book done in the next couple of days. So we're really rolling for the book after Dungeon Crawler Carl today. So let's pull up our...
Spoiler alert, I'm already like halfway through the second book, so you better catch up pretty soon there.
Oh, I will. We'll see what we got here. But I did rearrange the books for us, just made them a little shorter.
That's fair. Yeah.
That way we can get through them a little quicker. So let's give it a spin and see what we got.
Oh. All right.
All right. So let me grab this real quick. It's next to me. So Written on the Dark. Let me grab it real fast. Okay. So Written on the Dark is by Guy Gavriel Kay. So fantasy, the inside of the book. So Thierry Villar is a well-known, even notorious tavern poet, familiar with the rogues and shadows of that world, but not at all with courts and power. He is an unlikely person, despite his quickness to be caught up in the deadly contests of ambitious royal assassins and invading armies. So this will be the next read. Rather short, so only about 300 pages.
This is a newer one, written in
newer
2025.
book. Yep. So I grabbed this at the bookstore, just kind of on a whim. Wanted to read some Guy Gavriel Kay for a while. I have a few of his other books, but they're a little longer, so that's why I threw this one on the list. Cool. And some of his stuff is more like serial. This one, I believe, is a standalone. So, all right. This is actually what I replaced. Well, go ahead. Sorry.
I said back to Barnes and Noble.
Yeah. This is actually what I replaced Same Bed, Different Dreams with, because that's a much longer book. It's back there someplace. But I took that off the list and added this just to get it a little shorter for us.
Nice. I will admit, this, I have now gotten into the rhythm of actually reading physical books again. For a long time, I was doing all the audiobooks, but I agree, it's been so much easier to follow along and retain the information. So especially for this read, I'm happy that I read that physically. And then, for this one, I definitely, I'll go pick that one up in person too. So.
Yeah, it doesn't look too difficult, just kind of flipping through the book as far as like the actual prose, so should be a quick one. But that being said, next review is Dungeon Crawler Carl, which I have up there. Well, I should say I have the dust jacket up there because the actual book
Oh,
is upstairs.
nice, nice.
And then, so we'll do that one next, followed by this one, and then it'll probably be the second Dungeon Crawler Carl, because as you said, you are nearly finished with that one too.
I'm not. I'm unapologetically going to read through this entire series. This feels like Harry Potter when Harry Potter came out, only for adults. It's so
And
easy to chew through.
it is super easy to chew through.
It's so
Spoiler
dumb, but I
warning
love
so
it.
far.
Yeah.
I think it is so dumb. And I
It
mean,
is, but
honestly,
it's amazing.
like
Yeah.
we were talking about with Kafka, you need to be in a headspace for Kafka on the Shore.
Yeah.
Like Dungeon Crawler Carl has
This
a
is a beach read.
headspace. Like
Yeah.
it is super easy. It is pure enjoyment. It is
It's like
straight
watching
fun
a
into the
Twitch.
veins.
Yeah. It's like watching somebody play a video game. I mean, it really.
Yeah, it's like the really goofy D&D games that I run sometimes. Like,
Love it.
yeah,
So refreshing. I've needed something that's been light and nothing has hit, and now that I have a little bit of a hit of this, I just want to give me some more.
Yep. Which means you may actually be ahead of me in the reading for a little bit. But
That's right.
so next Dungeon Crawler Carl, followed by Written on the Dark, and then probably Dungeon Crawler Carl 2, whatever the subtitle is.
Yep.
And then it'll probably be another book, and then probably Dungeon Crawler Carl 3. So, all right, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
We'll have to start doing double headers here, I think, Jeff.
Yeah, with the time that we have, if we can, as I'm out here trying to protest AI data centers and go to work and take care of my kid.
And on that happy note.
Yep. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time for Dungeon Crawler Carl. Have a good one.
Yep.